Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Princess Juju bounced off the sofa after listening to Hui Yuhao's statement, and she stared at him with eyes overcome with fear. The news that Hui Yuhao had just relayed to Princess Juju was simply too astounding, and this was the same for the Star Luo Empire, a sect formed by evil soul masters, a sect that possessed an ultimate Doluo and a transcendent Doluo, and a sect that was under the protection of another nation hostile to them. Shu Jiujio's typical stability and composure began to waver as she panicked after listening to this piece of incredibly bad news. Are you for real? Princess Juju stared at Hui Yuhao as she subconsciously clenched her fists. Hui Yuhao heaved a faint sigh and said, "How can I lie about something like this, and how can I even succeed in doing so? You can observe when the competition begins, and you will see things for yourself." Princess Juju's face changed as she stumbled backwards, and her calves pressed against the sofa. She lost her center of gravity, and collapsed back onto it. That's impossible, just impossible. How can evil soul masters possess a transcendent Doluo, and even an ultimate Doluo? That's absolutely impossible. Have you seen it with your own eyes? Hui Yuhao knew that this piece of news was hard to believe. Furthermore, he was practically telling the Star Luo Empire that disaster had befallen them. Hui Yuhao lowered his voice and asked, "Have you ever heard of the Scorpion Tiger Doluo, Zhongpeng?" Scorpion Tiger Doluo? Are you talking about the half-evil soul master, that Scorpion Tiger Doluo? Hasn't he been missing for many years? Princess Juju had already reconciled with this piece of news, but she would rather be in denial of what she believed to be true. Hui Yuhao answered, "The Scorpion Tiger Doluo has already appeared in Radiant City, and we just met him in the measurement room. Furthermore, eldest senior brother has been hurt by people from the Holy Ghost Church, and is barely hanging on. I hope that you can calm down, Princess, and that you can treat this substantial problem seriously. You have to relay this information back to the Star Luo Empire as quickly as possible, so that the Star Luo Empire can be prepared to respond." Shu Jiujio was a lady, but the fact that she had such a status within the Star Luo Empire meant she had to have some outstanding qualities. She tried her best to control her emotions after hearing Hui Yuhao's reminder, and she nodded her head. "All right, please go on." Hui Yuhao said, "The Sun Moon Empire can be considered our mutual enemy. The war hasn't begun, but anyone can see that the day will come when the Sun Moon Empire cannot hold themselves back anymore. Furthermore, the Holy Ghost Church is made up of evil soul masters, and can be treated as the collective enemy of all other soul masters in the world. The Scorpion Tiger Doluo, Zhongpeng, is the transcendent Doluo that I have seen. I obliterated one of the Holy Ghost Church's branches when I was on exchange at the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy, and that episode gave me proof that this sect exists. We were ambushed by the Scorpion Tiger Doluo on our way back to Shrek. I wouldn't be here today if there hadn't been powerful individuals from Shrek Academy there with me during that episode. The Scorpion Tiger Doluo wasn't the strongest one in the force that came to ambush me, however. There was another name that I'm sure you've heard before, Princess, the Dragon Emperor Doluo, Long Xiaoyao." Shu Jiujio's eyes became a little slack after she heard that name. She had barely managed to calm herself down before this, and her expression drastically changed once more in the next moment. The one who possesses the Darkness Holy Dragon, and the one who was once known as one of the twin holy dragons of Black and White, the Dragon Emperor Doluo, Long Xiaoyao. But isn't he more than 200 years old if he's still alive? He hasn't appeared on the continent in the past 100 years. How is this possible? Shu Jiujio nodded her head silently. If the Sun Moon Empire possessed an ultimate Doluo that had been around for 200 years, that person alone could be apocalyptic for the Star Luo Empire. An ultimate Doluo had enough power to take down more than 10 title Doluo at a whim, and once the Star Luo Empire's top-level individuals had fallen, there would no longer be anything they could do against the Sun Moon Empire, and they would be rolled over. Shu Jiujio asked, "Do you have other information, Yuhao? If you have other important intel, I can purchase it directly from you. You can ask for any price you want." Her impression of Hui Yuhao was a lot better than before. Just as Bei Bei had said, it would be a lot easier for them to obtain the princess's trust with the information about the Holy Ghost Church as their main game. Shu Jiujio didn't even consider whether Hui Yuhao was deceiving her. First, he hailed from Shrek Academy. Secondly, this piece of news was simply too astounding. Furthermore, Hui Yuhao mentioned that the Holy Ghost Church had sent people to participate in the competition, and it would be too easy to expose a lie. Therefore, she completely believed him. She would immediately send people to obtain evidence once Hui Yuhao left, and then she would relay this information back to her empire. Hui Yuhao said, "I don't have other intel. We've only developed these speculations after we just realized that the Holy Ghost Church is also participating in the competition. We're here to find you because we can't afford to delay any longer. The Holy Ghost Church dares to parade around in broad daylight, and that goes to show that they are unafraid of threats from any other force. That also means that the Sun Moon Empire won't be holding back for much longer." Xu Jiujiu nodded and said, "You're right, this is too important. Let's do it this way, Yu Hao. You guys can return for now, and I will immediately settle this and pass this information back to the Empire, so that my brother can make a decision. If this is true, I'm afraid we'll have to pay a personal visit to Shrek Academy." Hui Yuhao said, "Don't be hasty, princess. I have something else for you. If you're interested, our cooperation can begin right away." Hui Yuhao gestured to Wang Donga behind him as he spoke. Wang Donga raised her left hand. The starlight sapphire ring that Hui Yuhao typically wore was now on her left hand, and 6 streaks of starlight glowed on the ring's surface. Xu Jiujiu was momentarily stunned, and a tinge of vigilance immediately appeared in her eyes. Hui Yuhao's expression didn't change at all in the face of such immense pressure. Faint purple light sparkled in his eyes as gentle spiritual undulations flowed outward and enveloped both him and Wang Donga inside. "Eh?" The old woman gasped in surprise, and there was now a hint of astonishment in her eyes as she stared at Hui Yuhao. She could tell from his soul power undulations that this youth had but 5 soul rings, give or take, yet he could defend himself against her stifling aura. He didn't cower away or back off at all, and she couldn't even lock onto him. How could this be something that a 5-ringed soul king could achieve? The old lady increased the pressure in the air after her initial flash of astonishment, and this pressure poured towards Hui Yuhao from all directions. Hui Yuhao didn't show any weakness at all, nor did he say a single word. Purple light circulated, and a diamond-like radiance gradually began to sparkle in his eyes. The purple light layer that was protecting them immediately became like the night sky, while stars dotted its surface. This titled Doluor didn't stifle Hui Yuhao's formidable spiritual power at all. Instead, it seemed as if Hui Yuhao was pushing back against her. Hui Yuhao's fighting strength paled in comparison to when he wasn't injured. However, his aura hadn't been weakened at all. Even Elder Xian had been astounded by his spiritual power, while the old woman was still quite a distance from Elder Xian's abilities. "That's enough, senior," Hui Yuhao sighed calmly. The old woman grunted coldly as she took a step forward, and she was just about to attack when Xu Jiujiu reached up to hold her back. "Don't be like this, Grandma Yi Man Yuhao is our guest." The old woman squinted as she said, "This fellow is a little abnormal, his spiritual power is far stronger than it should be. It's at a level that a soul king shouldn't possess. Let me take him down, Jiujiu, and then you can interrogate him." Xu Jiujiu said hurriedly, "Grandma Yi Man, he really is our guest, we can't treat our guests like that." "I'm sorry, Yuhao. Grandma Yi Man has been protecting me since I was a child, and she must have felt something dangerous from your storage-type soul tool, and that's the reason why she..." Hui Yuhao smiled faintly and said, "It's all right. Since you have no interest in seeing what we have to offer, then we will take our leave so that we can prevent any misunderstandings. Let's go, Dong, Wang Dong." Hui Yuhao nearly forgot that Wang Donga was currently dressed in a guy's clothes, and calling her Donga now would sound extremely weird. Wang Donga glanced coldly at Xu Jiujiu before she began to push Hui Yuhao away in his wheelchair. Xu Jiujiu's expression changed, and a hesitant and unsure look flashed across her face. The old woman in the red dress gave Xu Jiujiu an inquisitive look. Xu Jiujiu didn't hesitate for too long. She walked forward briskly and said, "I'm sorry, Yuhao. I was being too suspicious and oversensitive. I am deeply apologetic about what just happened, and I hope that the two of you can stay." Xu Jiujiu had felt an acutely dangerous aura when Wang Donga flashed the starlight sapphire ring, and the aura did come from that ring. That meant that even the starlight sapphire's quality couldn't mask the dangerous aura contained within, and the aura immediately flowed out the moment Wang Donga infused some soul power inside. That was the reason why both she and the old lady in red had immediately reacted like they had. Thoughts ran through her head, and Xu Jiujiu figured that Hui Yuhao had no reason to harm her. It was just as he had said, everyone was standing on the same line, they shared the same enemy, and the enemy of her enemy was her friend. What Hui Yuhao wanted to show her was possibly dangerous, but it was unlikely that it was targeted towards her. Furthermore, Hui Yuhao had just given them such important intel, she couldn't just turn him away just like that. The entire Shrek Academy was behind Hu Yuhao, after all. Hu Yuhao gestured to Wang Donga to tell her to stop, and turned his head around to look back at Xu Jojo. I just want to remind you, Princess, that all kinds of collaboration and teamwork has to be built on both parties trusting each other. If you don't trust me, then there's no need for any further cooperation, don't you think? The look in Princess Jojo's eyes became a little strange, and she cursed inside. What a waste. If such a handsome boy swings that way. Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga didn't know that the princess was silently criticizing them. Wang Donga took 2 steps forward, and she reached out with her left hand toward a relatively spacious spot inside the room. This was only a second-tier room, but it was a lot better than the rooms Hu Yuhao and others were staying in. The spacious living room was several hundred square meters in surface area, and there were bedrooms inside that weren't much smaller. This room was better in terms of both decorations and amenities than their room, and the place that Hu Yuhao and the others were living in weren't even on the same scale. Brilliant blue light flickered, and a large item appeared before Xu Jojo. Even though she sounded very trusting, she still took a few steps back subconsciously so that she could keep her distance from it, while the red-dressed titled Doluo stood in front of her, prepared to react against anything. They quickly saw what the item was. It was a strangely shaped metal item, and Xu Jojo could feel that this was a soul tool. Even though the Star Luo Empire's soul tool research paled in comparison to the Sun Moon Empire, the Star Luo Empire had been placing a lot of effort on soul tool research over the years after they realized the gap between them. The only difference was that they lacked top-tier soul engineers, and their research standards were also greatly inferior, so there was no way they could catch up to the Sun Moon Empire. Even so, Xu Jojo had seen quite a few soul tools, yet she had never seen nor heard about the thing before her. The entire soul tool took up about 10 square meters of space. There was a square metal base beneath it, and this base was the thing that took up 10 square meters. There was a belt beneath the metal base, and it seemed as if this soul tool could be pushed around. One could tell that it was quite heavy just by looking at it. Princess Juju nodded and said, the force of stationary soul tools mainly comes from their shells. The cannon itself can only determine the firing distance and accuracy. Does your soul tool fire 18 shells at the same time? Hu Yuhao said, there are different settings. You can fire everything at once, or you can them fire one by one. Our Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannon has several salient features, please allow me to introduce them to you. Firstly, even though it's just a Class 4 stationary soul tool, it can reach a distance comparable to a Class 6 soul tool, because it contains some of the Tang sect's secret techniques. You can carry out your own field tests after this. Princess Jojo's eyes sparkled. A Class 4 soul tool that had the same propulsion force as a Class 6 soul tool. This was quite an impressive invention. It also meant that this soul tool only required a Class 4 soul engineer to operate it, and Class 4 soul engineers were on a completely different levels than Class 6 soul engineers. It was comparable to the gap between a soul ancestor and a soul emperor. 1,000 soul ancestors were probably still weaker than 100 soul emperors, and this point alone had already attracted the princess. Xu Juiju calculated mentally, a stationary soul cannon that can fire 48 rounds before reloading, and a Class 4 soul tool with a Class 6 soul tool's firing range. 48 continuous rounds packs quite a punch. Just as Hu Yuhao said, this soul tool is definitely a powerful weapon on the battlefield. The Sun Moon Empire's army is only equipped with Class 5 stationary soul cannons. The biggest difference between a stationary soul cannon and a normal soul cannon was firing range. Normal soul cannons had extremely limited firing range, because the soul cannons were powered purely by soul power, which was converted into force to launch the cannon shells. However, stationary soul cannons were different. They relied on the stationary soul tool to launch their shells. A Class 4 soul tool was worth about 1/100th of a Class 6 soul tool. Xu Jojo calculated continuously in her head, and her eyes began to glow brighter and brighter, beginning to understand more about this metal object's practical uses and effects. Hu Yuhao continued, the Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannon that we have devised as of now is more suitable for installation upon city walls to defend the city, or it can be installed to defend fortresses. Both uses will be extremely effective. If you wish to equip your army with this item, we will come up with a mobile version. Princess Jojo immediately proposed the question that she was most concerned about. So, what about the price? How much is it? Hu Yuhao smiled and said, this has power comparable to a Class 6 soul tool's power, so it should be valued like a Class 6 soul tool. Truthfully, it can be considered a Class 6 soul tool, except it doesn't take as much to use it. Xu Jojo smiled and said, I'm sure that's not it. I believe it doesn't take that many resources to craft it, either. Furthermore, stationary soul tools have always been known to burn holes through our wallets. This cannon can fire 48 stationary cannon shells, so every round will bring me a lot of heartache. Yu Hao, your Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon is a little too expensive. You guys are also from the Star Luo Empire. Are you trying to reap profits from war? That means this will no longer be a cooperation. Xu Jiujiu stared at Hu Yuhao in astonishment. This was the first time she had seen a seller openly discussing the product's weaknesses and shortcomings. Hu Yuhao said, integrity always comes first for the Tang sect, no matter who we're dealing with, and we will never hide any weaknesses or cons that our products have. Furthermore, you could be considered one of our biggest clients. Xu Jiujiu smiled and said, then aren't you afraid that I'll lowball you? The price you have quoted isn't considered low at all. Furthermore, from a business perspective, there has never been a rule where the seller will always get the first price that he or she quotes. Hu Yuhao replied, I'm not sure how other people do their business, but upholding our integrity and providing top-quality products has always been of the utmost importance to the Tang sect. Xu Jiujiu stared deeply into his eyes. There was a look on regret on her face as she said, that's a pity. We can only think about this a little more. Hu Yuhao wasn't worried at all. He smiled and said, of course. I believe this deal will be a big one if it comes through, so it's natural for you to put in a little more thought, princess. We'll take our leave, then. We will give this Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon to you, and you will understand after field testing it that I haven't exaggerated anything at all. However, if you miss this opportunity today, and if other clients step into the picture, I'm afraid we cannot reserve purchase priority for you anymore. I need to make this clear so that I can absolve myself, and so that you won't hold that against me when it happens. Xu Jiujiu was very familiar with the art of negotiation. She thought to herself, do you think I'll fall for your tricks? She stood up and placed her palms on top of one another on her abdomen. She tilted her head towards Hu Yuhao, and there was no denying her nobility and elegance as a princess. That's all right. If we decide that this soul tool is something we need, we will contact the Tang sect as soon as possible. Hu Yuhao replied, okay. There are two things that I wish to remind you about. You can attach milk bottles to this soul tool when you want to use it, and you can use it directly. Class 4 milk bottles are enough. Otherwise, a soul engineer can use it by infusing soul power from the left side of its base, where the two palm grooves are located. The second thing I wish to remind you about is that I have installed a self-destruct mechanism into this Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon, so that we can protect our technology. If anybody attempts to take it apart, then there will be a formidable explosion. Please watch out for that, princess. Xu Jiujiu took exception to his words and said, seems like your sect has placed a lot of emphasis on this soul tool. If you're worried, you can take it back, and you can send someone into the Star Luo Empire to carry out experiments and field tests for us. Don't you think it's a bit too excessive to use milk bottles to operate a Class 4 soul tool like this? Milk bottles were considered one of the most valuable and expensive soul tools amongst those of the same level, and this was the same for all soul tools beneath Class 7. Hu Yuhao smiled and said, perhaps. I have already given this soul tool to you, so how can I take it back? Donga, take back our milk bottle, and we can bid our farewell to the princess. All right. Wang Donga took a few steps towards the Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon's base and pressed on a spot. A metal box sprang out, and Wang Donga retrieved a peculiarly shaped milk bottle that resembled a cannon shell and stored it inside her starlight sapphire storage ring. Hu Yuhao's words echoed in Xu Jiujiu's mind as she muttered under her breath, you don't need soul masters to operate the soul tool. What does that mean? You don't need soul masters to. The princess's body suddenly froze as if a thought burst into her head, and an astonished look came over her face while her face lost all color. That's not possible. Wang Donga wasn't pushing Hu Yuhao very quickly outside, and Hu Yuhao was slowly withdrawing his extended fingers, as if he were counting down. 5, 4, 3. Wait! A high-pitched exclamation echoed through the corridor, and Princess Jojo suddenly raced out from her room and blocked their path in a few brisk steps. Wang Donga stared at the concerned look on her face with amusement and thought to herself, Hu Yuhao is so cunning. Xu Jiujiu's breathing was clearly a little rushed, as she stared at Hu Yuhao with her charming blue eyes. You said that you don't need soul masters to operate this soul tool. What does that mean? Hu Yuhao seemed a little blank as he replied, that's what it means. Xu Jiujiu took a deep breath. Are you saying that? For some reason, her heartbeat began to race, and an indescribable premonition coursed through her mind. However, this premonition was just so immense, to the point where she could barely control herself anymore. Wait! Hu Yuhao raised his hand to interrupt any further questions from Xu Jiujiu and asked quietly, Princess, do you think it's appropriate that we are negotiating this out here? Xu Jiujiu bit down on her lower lip, as she stared at this innocent and harmless-looking fellow with a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. She really wanted to pounce on him and strangle him. This bastard brought up what is perhaps the most important point at the last moment to wake me up. Seriously. Many large sects and reputable academies currently resided in this building, so it was true that this place wasn't suitable or appropriate for discussing such top-secret things. Those thoughts did run through her head, but it was clear that there was no way she could put them into practice. She calmed herself down and regained her elegant posture and composure as she said apologetically, "It's my fault for overlooking that. I invite the two of you to come back, so that we can discuss this deal in further detail. What do you think?" Hui Yuhao smiled and said, "Of course. It would be even better if you could give us a cup of tea." Damn it. She felt resentment bursting in her mind, but she didn't dare to reveal even a single ounce of it on her face. Her heart was still beating very quickly, and the possibility that had just occurred to her was far too important for the Star Luo Empire. "I'm sorry, I was being discourteous before. I was too pleasantly surprised to see the two of you. Please come back, and I will personally make some tea for you two of you." She made a gesture for them to kindly proceed back into her room as she spoke. "All right, we'll have to trouble you, then." Hui Yuhao didn't push around too much. He had to play this just right, as going too far was as bad as not doing enough. He was dealing with a big customer, after all. They returned to the princess's room, and Shujojo personally brought them 2 fragrant cups of tea, as she invited Wang Donga to sit down on the sofa before turning towards Hui Yuhao with an eager look on her face. One had to admit that the princess was extremely pretty, and she could be ranked along with Jiang Nan and Wang Donga as a top-tier beauty. If the princess had been staring at someone else with the same look on her face, they might possibly stop at nothing to give the princess whatever she wanted. It was a pity then that Wang Donga was the only person in Hui Yuhao's heart. Furthermore, Hui Yuhao had seen quite a few top-class beauties. He possessed immense spiritual power, and his mind was steadfast and unwavering. He was naturally unaffected by Shu Jiuzhou's small psychological move. "Do you have any questions or doubts, princess? Please ask, and I will tell you everything I can." Hui Yuhao's face was cool and collected, and the sincerity in his eyes was no less than the look in Shu Jiuzhou's eyes. Shu Jiuzhou planted her hands on the desk in front of her and took a deep breath. She didn't mince her words, pausing slightly as she enunciated each one. "Will you die if you make yourself clearer?" Hui Yuhao had a forced smile on his face and an innocent look as he said, "My words are very clear. It means the Tang Sect's Juga Divine Crossbow Cannon no longer requires a Soul Master to operate it after attaching a milk bottle to it. Normal people definitely don't meet the requirements, as they are not strong enough, and they will struggle with reloading and switching magazines. Only soldiers that are relatively stronger can operate this soul tool, and it's even better if they've been trained before. Can you understand my explanation now, princess?" The redness that was on Shu Jiuzhou's face due to her fury immediately vanished, and she said eagerly, "Are you for real? Even soldiers that are not soul masters can operate a Juga Divine Crossbow Cannon?" Hui Yuhao nodded and said, "Of course. Otherwise, how could I claim that our Juga Divine Crossbow Cannon has excellent value for the money? If not, how could I sell you a Class 4 soul tool for the price of a Class 6 soul tool? Wouldn't that just be a rip-off?" Shu Jiuzhou leaned against the sofa, and her eyes changed continuously as her brain began to spin with ideas and thoughts. Her fists were clenched slightly from all her intense and riled-up emotions. Hui Yuhao picked up his cup of tea and finished it with a gulp. This was good tea, indeed. It was aromatic, and its fragrance lingered in his mouth, while it was fresh and quenched his thirst at the same time. 5 minutes passed before Shu Jiuzhou suddenly stared at Hui Yuhao and asked, "Can you give us a promotional price if we order in bulk?" She was extremely clear about the value of Class 6 soul tools. Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, "No can do. I've said it already, that our product is excellent value for the price, and the price will not change. The price will remain the same whether we're selling the cannons to you or to other clients, and we will be fair to everyone. The only benefit I can give you, princess, is purchase priority. There's an upper limit to our production speed, after all." Hui Yuhao gave Wang Donga a look as he spoke. Wang Donga nodded and passed the milk bottle that she had taken back before this to Shu Jiuzhou. Shu Jiuzhou felt a little strange, as she held onto the strangely shaped milk bottle that was at least twice as heavy as a normal Class 6 milk bottle. The materials used to craft this milk bottle didn't seem ordinary or typical. Hui Yuhao said, "Princess, I'll pass another piece of secret intel to you for free." "Speak." Hui Yuhao said, "You're in charge of intelligence. Are you aware that the illustrious Virtue Hall has devised technology to seal milk bottles? That means, the soul power contained within milk bottles will no longer leak outside." Shu Jiuzhou felt her heart skip a beat. "Are you sure?" Hui Yuhao nodded and said, "The Tang sect has also mastered this technology. The milk bottle you're holding in your hands is sealed, which you will know once you give it a try. The truth is that the cost of crafting one of these milk bottles is equivalent to purchasing 5 Juga Divine crossbow cannons. With this sealed milk bottle, you can reload a Juga Divine crossbow cannon 10 times without switching milk bottles. 10 magazines mean you can fire 480 stationary cannon shells in one go. I'm sure you understand what this means. Xu Jiujiu was left sitting motionless on the sofa even after Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong'er left her room. Her enchanting eyes sparkled with sophisticated light, and Tang sect had been deeply imprinted on her. All her complicated emotions and thoughts gradually became disappointment and a sense of loss. Bitterness began to surface at the corner of her lips as she said, "We are still so slow, Grandma Yi Man. We are trailing the Sun Moon Empire in soul tool research, and we are even lagging behind Shrek Academy." The Tang sect is undoubtedly representing Shrek Academy. Juga Divine crossbow cannon, sealed milk bottles, impressive indeed. The old woman sat down beside her and gently caressed Xu Jiujiu's flowing hair. "Don't put too much pressure on yourself, child. You're just a girl, and you have enough burdens on your shoulders. That boy is extraordinary. I studied him closely, and I've never seen spiritual power like his in my entire life. His spiritual power is both unique and powerful at the same time, and it's on an entirely different scale from his soul power. Furthermore, his eyes were calm and collected from beginning to end, no matter what expression he was wearing. Even you are a little inferior to him in this respect. If you can't have a person like that as a friend, then..." The old lady squinted a little as a look of hostility and murder flashed across her eyes. Xu Jiujiu's expression changed as she exclaimed, "No, Grandma Yi Man." Grandma Yi Man stared at her amusingly and said, "What? You can't bear to see anything happen to him. He seems a lot younger than you are." Xu Jiujiu blushed and leaned into Grandma Yi Man's embrace disapprovingly. "What are you talking about, Grandma Yi Man? There's nothing between the two of us. That guy is one of the most outstanding individuals of Shrek Academy's younger generation, and the Academy places great emphasis on him. My elder brother has already prepared a plan to pull him close, and this guy is likely to become the link between us and Shrek Academy. Therefore, we can't touch him, and we have to protect him. Grandma Yi Man, what do you think about the Holy Ghost Church that he spoke of?" Yi Man's face turned black as she said, "That's a tough one. If he's right about the Dragon Emperor Doluo being used by the Holy Ghost Church, then the Star Luo Empire will be in some real trouble. We need to act, and we need to do it now." Xu Jiujiu tilted her head and glanced at the massive Juga Divine crossbow cannon resting on the floor. "Time is of the essence, Grandma Yi Man. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you this time." Yi Man heaved a faint sigh and replied, "What trouble is there? I should do more for the Empire while I can still move. I'll take this back to the Empire for field testing and experiments right away." Xu Jiujiu had believed from beginning to end that the Tang sect was chosen by Shrek Academy as their spokesperson, and it was because of this misconstrued understanding that she placed a lot more emphasis on the Tang sect. Wang Dong'er pushed Hu Yuhao back into his room, and it was only at this moment that an exhausted look came over Hu Yuhao's face. Wang Dong'er lowered her voice and said, "Yuhao, why did you keep beating around the bush with Princess Jiujiu?" Hu Yuhao answered, "That's so I can give her a stronger impression, and it's also because I wanted to catalyze this deal and agreement with the Star Luo Empire and finalize it as fast as possible. If the Sun Moon Empire launches an invasion, the Star Luo Empire cannot avoid being the vanguard and bearing the brunt of their attack. Therefore, they feel the most urgency, and I believe they will come to a decision fairly quickly." Wang Dong'er asked, "How about the Heavenly Soul Empire and the Douling Empire?" Hu Yuhao said, "We can take it a little slower with them. One reason is because we don't know anybody in these empires' higher levels with a status like Princess Jiujiu. The second reason is because these empires may not send one of their high-ranking officials to us. Furthermore, our production speed is limited, and we may be hit with overwhelming demand if the Star Luo Empire chooses to take us up on this deal." Wang Dong'er supported him and laid him down on the bed. She smiled as she said, "I think you're becoming more and more like a businessman." Hu Yuhao forced a laugh and said, "It's not my wish for that to happen. However, the Holy Ghost Church's appearance has given us too much threat and danger." Wang Dong'er gently combed and tidied the hair on his forehead and said, "You can rest for a little while. I'll buy dinner for you, and we should rest early after eating. Are you tired from hustling around all day?" Hu Yuhao said nothing as he stared at her. Wang Dong'er blushed as she felt his piercing gaze. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Hu Yuhao smiled faintly and said, "Ever since I returned after sustaining these injuries, I've become the luckiest and most fortunate person in the world." Wang Dong'er grunted and said, "Are you trying to say that I wasn't nice enough to you before this? The Sun Moon Empire seems like they really are going to make a move. However, are the Heavenly Soul Empire and Star Luo Empire prepared for that? It's hard to say, and even if they've made their preparations, the Holy Ghost Church entering the fray will undoubtedly cause disarray and mess up their plans. The Sun Moon Empire must have ulterior motives for hosting this competition. How can we delay as much as possible before the Sun Moon Empire takes action? The Tang sect has just begun our multifaceted expansion. The Tang sect needs time to expand, and I also need time to recover. Once the war begins, we will need sufficient time to prepare if the Tang sect wants to make a difference in the war and take this opportunity to expand and become stronger, and if the Tang sect wishes to help the three native empires of the Dolor continent against the Sun Moon Empire. Yes. We have to devise a plan to slow the Sun Moon Empire down and delay their plans for war as much as possible during this competition. But how do we go about accomplishing that? The goal had changed, but he couldn't really think of a proper plan, so he could only play things by ear and wait and see. The Sun Moon Empire wasn't just targeting the Star Luo Empire and Shrek Academy, and the other big sects, the Heavenly Soul Empire and the Do Ling Empire could form an alliance. Dinner wasn't very sumptuous, but Wang Donga had returned quickly, and it was clear that she was worried about Hu Yuhao. No matter what he ate, everything that entered Hu Yuhao's mouth was as delicious as ever with Wang Donga beside him. The night was upon them. Hu Yuhao didn't dare to lie in bed and indulge himself in the warmth of Donga's companionship like before, and he immediately started to meditate. Wang Donga sat beside him and also began to meditate. Hu Yuhao had already made accurate predictions about the state of his body. If he followed his current cultivation method, he would need at least 3 years before he could absorb every ounce of origin energy of ultimate ice in his body, and this was a conservative estimate where he assumed nothing went wrong. He would undoubtedly break through to become a Soul Emperor once he finished absorbing everything, and if he had enough soul rings, he had the possibility to break through to become a Soul Sage. 3 years of being crippled in exchange for speedy improvement, this deal wasn't that bad or disadvantageous for him in the end. After all, neither Bei Bei, Shu Sansha, nor Wang Donga could possibly become Soul Sages within 3 years even if they wanted to. Therefore, Hu Yuhao wasn't that worried about his cultivation. He could only avoid mistakes and problems if he maintained a calm mind during his cultivation. Otherwise, if he went down the wrong path and went insane in his current state, he would face mortal danger. The night went by peacefully, and Wang Donga pushed Hu Yuhao into Bei Bei's room when dawn arrived after they finished breakfast. Bei Bei was strong, and his injuries had stabilized. The only thing was that his wounds were far too severe, so he still had to rest in bed. Hu Yuhao recounted the negotiation he had conducted with Shu Jojo on the previous day. Bei Bei told him delightedly, after listening to his description, that Hu Yuhao could decide on other similar issues in the future. Bei Bei and Shu Sansha were the only ones who were truly in charge of things. The other members still prioritized their studies within Shrek Academy. He Kaitu participated in the Tang sect's soul tool production and design, but the others spent most of their time on Sea God's Island. Hu Yuhao and He Kaitu had taken quite a burden off Bei Bei and Shu Sanshi's shoulders ever since they had returned from their exchange program. This was especially so because Hu Yuhao had returned with voluminous blueprints and even brought back a soul tool expert in Xianzuan. This immediately brought the Tang sect to another level, and their most important soul tool hall was subsequently perfected. The Tang sect's expansion was finally on the right track, and Bei Bei could finally heave a sigh of relief. He had completely no worries at all about Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao was their designer, and he was extremely familiar with all the Tang sect's soul tools. Furthermore, Hu Yuhao was meticulous and careful, and rarely made mistakes. Shu Sansha was an all-round individual, but he didn't understand enough about soul tools, while he was too playful at the same time. Bei Bei didn't feel assured at all about him, so he passed command to Hu Yuhao after he was wounded. Shu Sansha didn't have any objections to this at all, and he was even elated about the decision, as he didn't want even a little bit of this added trouble and responsibility. Eldest senior brother, I predict that we will have a response from Princess Jojo by tomorrow night at the latest. With her knowledge and her experience, I trust that she won't pass up this wonderful opportunity. It seems like we will be busy very soon. Bei Bei was lying down on the bed. He smiled and said, Teacher Xian will be busy, you mean? Your Zhuge divine crossbow cannon managed to tame Teacher Xian back then, so how can Princess Jojo not bend to your will? We can actually lower the price, as the cost of our production is. Hu Yuhao shook his head, and a mysterious smile broke out across his face. Eldest senior brother, we don't place excessive emphasis on money, but we can't afford not to charge a high price for the Tang sect's development. Bei Bei's eyes sparkled. He immediately understood what Hu Yuhao was trying to say and said, You're thinking about. Yes. Hu Yuhao could tell that his eldest senior brother understood him, and he immediately nodded. The room wasn't that big, so Zhong Lishuan immediately saw Bei Bei lying on the bed when she walked in, as well as Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga beside him. She was aware of Hu Yuhao's circumstances, but her face immediately changed when she saw Bei Bei lying down on the bed. She walked up concernedly and said, "What happened to you, Bei Bei?" Hu Yuhao, Shu Sansha, and Wang Donga were slightly taken aback as they watched the worry and anxiety in their eldest senior sister's eyes. Hu Yuhao and Shu Sansha exchanged a look, and they immediately felt the peculiarity in each other's eyes. The concern that their eldest senior sister displayed towards their eldest senior brother seemed a little out of the ordinary. Bei Bei forced a smile and said, "Calm down, eldest senior sister. I'm all right." Zhong Lishuan seemed to realize that she had lost her composure. She withdrew her emotions a little as she pinched Bei Bei's wrist to check his injuries. Wang Qiuer walked in together with Zhong Lishuan. However, she walked up next to Hu Yuhao and glanced down at him before her eyes turned away very naturally, as if she were looking at a stranger. Wang Donga looked on steadily and sighed to herself. The colder Wang Qiuer was to Hu Yuhao, the more Wang Donga could tell that Hu Yuhao was still very important to Wang Qiuer. Qiuer, why do you do this to yourself?" Wang Donga had thought long and hard when Hu Yuhao disappeared without a trace back then. She was ready and willing to share Hu Yuhao's love with Wang Qiuer if she had to, and it was because of this thought that she was a lot less hostile towards her now. This was especially so after she felt the entirety of Hu Yuhao's love for her. All she felt toward Wang Qiuer now was sympathy, and not a single hint of envy or jealousy. At this moment, she was being very generous by standing on Hu Yuhao's other side. "How have you been, Qiuer?" Wang Qiuer didn't bother greeting him, but Hu Yuhao had to greet her, as she had saved his life more than once. Furthermore, he had long sensed the feelings that she had for him, and he couldn't help but feel a little guilty about them, as he couldn't help but feel as if he owed her something. "I've been very well," Wang Qiuer answered coldly. It didn't seem like she had been very well from the way she responded. "Oh?" Hu Yuhao didn't know what else to say, and he gave her a simple response. Zhong Lishuan concluded her scrutiny of Bei Bei's body with a solemn look on her face. "Your organs are almost in different positions, and you've been hit with an intense and strange soul power. It's dark, evil, and eerie. Did you encounter evil soul masters?" Everyone couldn't help but be impressed as they listened to her words. Zhong Lishuan's analysis was concise, accurate, and to the point. She lived up to her name as the inner courtyard's eldest senior sister. Wang Qiuer said nothing, and she didn't even greet the other Tang sect members, as she followed behind Zhong Lishuan and departed the room. The room descended into silence once Zhong Lishuan and Wang Qiuer left, while Shu Sansha, Hu Yuhao, and Wang Donga all stared at Bei Bei. Bei Bei felt goosebumps break out over his body from their stares. He cleared his throat and said, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Shu Sansha looked up at the ceiling and heaved a long sigh. "I initially believed that girls would only crush on a person like me, incredibly handsome, romantic and elegant, natural and unrestrained. I never thought that you, Bei Bei, you who has a small nose and tiny eyes, had a secret like this. If you hadn't been injured such that our eldest senior sister revealed her true feelings as a result, I wouldn't have been able to tell. I didn't know that you and our eldest senior sister had a complicated relationship." An awkward look flashed across Bei Bei's face. "Bullshit. Don't spout nonsense and taint eldest senior sister's clean name and reputation." Shu Sansha laughed coldly and said, "Do you think I'm as clueless as the others who don't know you as well as I do? It's obvious that the look in her eyes wasn't right the instant she walked in and realized that you had been injured. When has eldest senior sister ever looked at someone else from the inner courtyard like that? The look in your eyes in that moment seemed like everything that was happening was right and within expectations. This proves that you had already predicted this response from the moment you saw her. Is that not enough to prove the secret relationship between the two of you? Wow, Bei Bei, you've hidden something like this from your best brothers. Even I had no clue about this, that you've done something to even our eldest senior sister. Tell us everything, right now. If not, I won't show you any mercy even though you're hurt." Bei Bei stared at the falsely indignant look on Shu Sanshi's face, and turned towards Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga, who were also staring at him with the strange looks in their eyes. "Oh, my reputation. Eldest senior sister messed up, because she's too concerned." Shu Sansha leaned in by the bedside with a gossipy look on his face. "Quick, tell us. What's going on between you and our eldest senior sister? You have always been so dejected and concerned about Xia, so when did eldest senior sister enter the picture?" Bei Bei could tell that he couldn't hide this secret any longer. He adjusted the expression on his face and said, "I'll tell you since you guys have already realized something is going on. However, you guys have to keep my secret, as this concerns our eldest senior sister's name and reputation. Whoever leaks this out will no longer be my brother." "Okay." Wang Donga was the first to agree, and without any hesitation at all. The corner of Bei Bei's mouth twitched as he said, "It's the same even for my sisters." Wang Donga giggled and said, eldest senior brother, we should always enjoy blessings and endure misfortunes together. Why don't I call everyone here? Do you think third senior brother can hide something like this from fourth senior sister? I have chosen terrible friends. Bei Bei exclaimed in defeat. He Kaitu, Jiang Nana, and Xiao Xiao were quickly gathered. Nana, Ji Juechen, and Jing Ziyan were ultimately not as close to them. Jiang Nan and Xiao Xiao's beautiful eyes sparkled when they heard that there was some secret between Bei Bei and their eldest senior sister that they had to know about. This was the classic gossipy and nosy look, and even the typically simple and straightforward He Kaitu was full of surprise. You can't tell anyone else? Bei Bei exclaimed painfully. Really, nobody else can know about this? Why don't we just let this go? You guys can just pretend you don't know anything at all. Jiang Nan screamed and gasped in astonishment, while Xiao Xiao grabbed He Kaitu's arm as tightly as she could. It was clear that she was as astounded as everybody else. Arranged marriage. Shu Sanqi's mouth was open so wide that a goose egg could be stuffed into it. Who dared to think that the Shrek Academy's inner courtyard's chief disciple, the person that everyone referred to respectfully as eldest senior sister, the person that joined the Sea Gods Pavilion at the age of 30 to become one of the council members, Zhong Lixian, was actually arranged to marry Bei Bei. This could no longer be described as unbelievable, this was simply something that could only exist in fantasies. Bei Bei pulled a long face. Yes, all of you heard that right, and I didn't say anything wrong. Eldest senior sister was arranged to marry me. It's a long story, and I'll have to start from 20 years ago. Shu Sanxia pulled over a chair and sat down beside his bed. That's all right, we're not rushing things. You can take your time. Hui Yuhao stared at Bei Bei with his eyes wide open and his jaw hanging slack. What he was feeling inside was similar to the awe and astonishment that Princess Jojo felt when she discovered that his Zhuge divine crossbow cannon could be operated by normal soldiers. Bei Bei shot a glare at Shu Sanxia and said, my mother passed away on the day I was born due to a difficult birth. My father was too depressed, and he took a nearly impossible task from the Shrek Guardians against Ancestor Xian's wishes and departed. He hasn't returned since, and I became an orphan. My family only had a single son, and my ancestors have ruled that all sons will follow their mother's surname. My parents' death adversely affected Ancestor Xian, and he treated me like his own son during that period of time, as if I were the most important thing in the world. Eldest senior sister was actually brought back by one of the academy's teachers, and Ancestor Xian ran into them by accident. Eldest senior sister had a blank look in her eyes back then, as if she had lost her soul and her spirit. She is from one of the Heavenly Soul Empire's aristocratic families, but they were ambushed and attacked by another aristocratic family, and her entire family was annihilated. She had been underneath her bed, as she was playing hide-and-seek with her mother when disaster struck, so she managed to avoid certain death. Her mother crashed onto the ground beside the bed, and even used her own body to cover the bed, as she was drawing her last breaths, even placing her hand behind her to cover her daughter's mouth. Ancestor Xian checked her body after hearing about her circumstances, and he discovered that eldest senior sister had great talent in terms of her martial soul. She had congenitally full soul power, something that was rarely seen, and she also possessed a 100-year soul ring, while she had already broken through to rank 20. He guessed that our eldest senior sister was the future of her family, and the person that her family wanted to do everything they could to nurture. Part 1 end here.